Good evening, Ms. Fawzia Khan. I'm the president of the American Muslim Women Association. And welcome to AMWA's virtual program on Know Your Rights. Before I start, I'd like to start with a short prayer from Prophet Moses. And this is a prayer that we say when it was said when he asked God to help him by saying the right thing and giving the right message so that people can have a better understanding. So I'm just going to say it in Arabic. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So I see that Sister Mafias watching the video earlier about that had the AMWA message and the first slide of AMWA mission is to help share information on Islam and increase community awareness about our faith by having social and educational programs. AMWA also works with Office for Women, so we also have family-related programs. The second slide that you saw was on about the AMWA board members. Jo Mema is heading that program, and she's heading today's program. So it came out of prior to 9/11, most of our community members were busy with family, work, or socializing, and that was the objective without any, fear. After the tragedy, we were forced to be aware about our rights and our liberties. We had one program with CARE about knowing our rights as American citizens. And I hope today's session, we can get some more information for our communities to help aid against Asian hate crime. So, Sister Omema, you want to take over from here?
Okay. Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Peace. Shalom. My name is Umayma Abu Saud. I am the treasurer of AMWA. It's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for today, Ms. Afaf Nasher. Ms. Afaf Nasher is a lawyer who serves as the executive director for the New York chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is known as CARE New York. CARE is a civil rights organization serving the diverse Muslim population in New York State with direct legal representation, advocacy, media work, educational training, civic engagement, and more. Ms. Nasher's involvement with CARE New York stems from an enthusiasm to challenge discrimination in all forms, promote positive activism, and foster an understanding of the Muslim American identity. Please welcome Ms. Nasher.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Umayma. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings of peace to all of our guests. I'm so happy to be among all of you. It's so nice to see all your faces, if only on the screen. You know, the pandemic has us far away from each other, socially distancing, but at least to see you all on the screen makes a bit of a difference and brings us at least a little bit closer. And I also want to thank AMWA. You know, she was talking a little bit about CARE New York's work, and I noticed how closely correlated our mission is with Amwa's mission. I know we do civil rights work, but just your purpose and mission into serving the public with educational programs, with promoting, knowledge of Islam, that's all really important for us as well. So Jazakumullah khairan for allowing me to be a part of this program. To everyone else here, on behalf of myself, the team, again, we really hope that this session for Know Your Rights, specifically Know Your Rights with law enforcement, is something that we can all benefit from, inshallah. I'll begin just very quickly with an overplay on a little bit of CARE New York's work, because I want all of you to make sure that you're utilizing our nonprofit, right? So as Sister Umaima said, CARE is actually a civil rights organization. CARE is national in scope. We have offices from New York to California, Texas, Washington, Ohio, all over the states, alhamdulillah. And CARE New York is your local CARE chapter, right? And locally, what that means is we serve the entire New York State population, which mashallah is 1 million or more strong Muslims in New York State as in total. And we see it as our honor and our privilege to be able to help people with direct legal representation. As Sister Umaima said, I'm an attorney myself. And the types of matters that we work with, of course, have to deal with Islamophobia and have to deal with discrimination. What does that mean? It means, for example, discrimination at the workplace. Let's say, for example, you interview for a position and they don't want to give it to you because of your ethnicity or because you wear hijab or because, you're of a particular faith. We also help hate crime victims. Very unfortunately, we have a number of those. It's actually the second or third top thing that we deal with on an annual basis, where we have brutal hate crimes for people old and young. And they tend to be, of course, hate crimes because they are picking on them because of their outward Islamic identity. The other thing that we do, of course, is a lot of advocacy work. And by advocacy, I mean, there's a lot of policy work to be done, especially on Islamophobia, but policy work in general. So for example, we've been doing a lot of policy work in terms of surveillance, which very much impacts our community as well as all communities of color. We've done a lot of advocacy work on getting halal food into public schools, for example. So those are some of the things that we do. I always like to say that CARE New York's work is both proactive and reactive. Reactive is something bad happens and people then call upon us. And then proactive are these types of educational programs. And we have a very wide array. And Sister Umaima, after consulting with her board, came back and said they've chosen the law enforcement one. And I think that's a very wise one. And that's definitely one of the bread and butters of CARE New York, because it's something that really impacts all Muslims across the board, as well as everyone else. But I'm going to focus in a little bit on Muslims, because as my colleagues at AMWA have just talked about, especially post 9/11, Muslims have had, unfortunately, a complicated relationship with law enforcement, in the sense that we have been profiled immensely, profiled at the airport, profiled in streets, profiled for surveillance, and people are usually shocked at just how often law enforcement comes and knocks on our doors. It is very, very commonplace for the FBI to come knocking on a Muslim doors, unfortunately, and visiting masajid. It's very common for law enforcement to send undercover folks into our places of worship. As a matter of fact, I know that many of you are spread across, but many of you are in the Westchester area or above, but the NYPD has certainly extended its jurisdiction as far as to New Jersey, and the kind of surveillance that was monitoring the Muslim Americans in New York and way beyond was absolutely astonishing. We had known that they were already recording, that they were already going into our places of worship, for example. But it got to be so bad that even our imams, our clerics, were literally tape recording themselves because they didn't want anything to be taken out of context. Now, before I go into the nuts and bolts of this Know Your Rights workshop, I want you to please feel free to write down your questions in the chat. As Sister Umaima told me, we're definitely going to leave some time at the end of the program to address any of those questions, inshallah. And I also want to just start out by making this very real. Sometimes we talk in general, but at the same time, One thing that you should know is that every single reason why we give these workshops, why we do these workshops, it comes out of real life cases. So who's actually being targeted by law enforcement? Why does this actually apply to you? Well, let me give you guys some examples. There was one time, for example, that we had a bunch of teenage boys who went to the beach. It was actually after Ramadan, which is upcoming now. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to see the blessed holy month of Ramadan. Ameen. And so these boys were out after they had done their late night Taraweeh prayers, and they decided to go for breakfast, right? So they went for breakfast. They ate their morning meal before sunrise, before dawn. And then thereafter, because it was already so close to praying the dawn prayer at Fajr time, they decided they're going to go to the beach because they live near the beach, and they waited there to watch the sunrise, and they prayed on the beach. Well, apparently a jogger went by. She was jogging on the beach. For some reason, she thought that these few guys praying on the beach was somehow suspicious or dangerous, and she called the FBI. I guess she had taken their license plate, because soon thereafter, all these young guys got FBI visits to their door. And all of a sudden, we were getting calls to our office. It was so weird. It was like within 5 minutes of each other, we had one call after another, and we realized that all these boys must have been together for this to have happened. And then we rooted it back to their prayer at the beach, right? That's one example of how crazy this can be. I'll give you a crazier example. I had one sister and her friends. You know, Muslim women who are practicing, we practice modest dress. So many of us do not wear, for example, bathing suits on a public beach. So these group of women wanted to get some swimming in. So they rented a nice, big, fancy house with an indoor swimming pool way out in the island. And it was a very affluent neighborhood. And so there were these women in hijab who had rented out this vacation home, who were enjoying themselves for the week. And wouldn't you know it, when they came back home, they got FBI visits. And what was the reason? People were suspicious to see women like them in that neighborhood. And they were actually questioned. An FBI agent was actually asking, what were you doing there? Pretty insane, right? We've had FBI visits come into masajid or mosques, right? And he has spoken to an imam who, of course, welcomed him in, because that's our typical notion of hospitality, right? And we start, speaking to them, and the thinking is if we give them information, if we show them that we're good people, they're not going to come to us, anymore, or, they're going to see we're good, and that's it. But by the time that conversation ended, that agent was actually telling him to report back if certain ethnic groups were coming to the masjid. If that's not profiling at your most astonishing best, then I don't know what is. So I give these examples by way of saying, look, anyone is open to getting questioned by law enforcement. You could be young, you could be older, you can be a religious person, you can be not a religious person. It could be for any reason at all. And it's important, whether you're Muslim or not, to know what rights you have when interacting with law enforcement. So now let's get into the nuts and bolts, inshallah. Sister Umayma, I'm going to rely on you to keep me good on my time, inshallah. I want to respect everybody else's time as well. Okay, so 101 on law enforcement. All right, my brothers and actually no brothers, this is Amwa, my sisters. That's force of habit, my apologies. So inshallah, there's going to be a couple of scenarios that we go over. We have law enforcement, typically with police and FBI agents who come and visit you and knock on your door. That's going to be the first one. But then there are other instances as well. For example, at the airport, which I think is something really important for us to talk about, because Muslims are definitely profiled in a very extreme way at the airport as well. So at the minimum, I want to try to go over these two instances, inshallah, because I really feel like they impact our community the most. So what happens typically when law enforcement agents come to your door and they knock on your door? I always tell people, at least me, I live in New York City. I don't go opening the door for just anyone. If somebody knocks on my door, the first thing I'm going to do is what I would say is common sense, what we all teach our kids to do. And that is, we say, who is it, right? We want to know who's at the door before we open, correct? So we ask, who is it? And let's say the agent says, I'm agent so-and-so. Okay. I'd like to ask you a few questions. That's normally the introduction. All right. Now you have a choice. You can either open the door or you cannot open the door. Because I want to make this a little bit interactive, I'm going to ask you if you feel comfortable. You can either put it in the chat or you can just raise your hand here if you're on video. How many of you think that you should open the door or that you must open the door? I'll give you guys a minute, a few seconds.
I will not open the door.
I see you, Deb. Okay, I'm seeing no's in the chat. All right, so we have sophisticated women here, mashallah. So the truth is, one person said I would open the door but ask for a badge. That's a fair enough answer. All right, remember, everything that I'm telling you are your rights. We're not necessarily giving you legal advice in terms of what you must absolutely do. What we're telling you are these are your rights and you may avail yourself of those rights. All right, so what must you do? Must you open the door? We tell people, we advise people not to open the door. Well, why is that? Well, think of it this way. Once you open the door and you have 2 agents outside, typically it's at least 2 agents, and now you're face to face with them, the stress level automatically goes up. The anxiety level automatically goes up. You have 2 people in uniform. Sometimes they have a weapon on them. They're showing you badges, right? However, so somebody said you don't have to open the door, but that could be problematic. All right. So what is it that we advise you to do? Well, in one sense, the person who said ask for a badge, I'm assuming, let me see, that was our sister Emel. She said open and check the badge, probably because she wants to identify them. And that is important, isn't it? You want to know who's at the door, who those agents are, why they're at your door, right? So this is what we tell people to do. You do not open the door. Instead, you respectfully and courteously say, Agent so-and-so, please leave your card in my mailbox or slip it under the door, and we'll have our attorney contact you, right? Very, very simple. Why do we give you that advice? Because with that simple one line, you now have ascertained who they are, what agency they're with, what is their name, right? You're giving the information to an attorney to now contact them on your behalf, and you haven't put yourself in a position in which you're face to face with agents who are going to pressure you to answer questions, okay? So I'm going to repeat that line because I really want all of you to have it ingrained in your mind and to make it automatic. It sounds simple, but I got to tell you that even people, you know, who say, oh, that's easy, but in that moment, there's a little bit of anxiety and becomes that much harder to say. So you're going to say, Agent so-and-so or Officer so-and-so, please leave your business card in the mailbox or slip it under the door, and I'll have my attorney call you. Now, what do you think the reply is going to be? Anyone guess?
They will break the door.
Sister Ma'am said they're going to break your door down. They're going to bust in.
Try to sweet talk you.
They're going to try to sweet talk you. Be like, Deb, come on. You've seen us around, right? Okay. Any other suggestions?
Or they might become aggressive and
Or
say,
they might become aggressive.
and say, you know, you have to open this door, you know, and if you don't want to get in any further problems, then open the door.
Right.
You know?
Okay. So Sister Emma also said on the chat, I imagine they will try and verbally persist or intimidate. Yes, these are all things except for breaking the door down. That would be crazy, right? So Sister Ma'am, if that happens, you make sure you take your phone and you record it because we want to see it, right? So that doesn't mean, by the way, that they're never allowed in, and we're going to get into that circumstance in which they are permitted in. So we're talking in general, and then we're going to get into the exceptions, okay? Generally speaking, they will try to persist. They're going to try to persist by saying, hey, you're not in any trouble. We just want to speak with you. Okay. So the first way is like half intimidate, half, you know, half sort of persistently sweet talk, like Deb said, right? Hey, you know, you're not in any trouble. Why do you need a lawyer? Right? We're only here to talk to you for a few minutes. We just need to ask you a few questions. Why do you need a lawyer? Right? So they make you feel bad for wanting to utilize your rights, essentially. And especially in our community, we tend to start getting paranoid and we start to think, well, maybe it's better if I speak to them, because if I speak to them, it's true, I've got nothing to hide, right? But here's the problem. And I'm going to ask a question and I want some answers. Are you allowed to lie to law enforcement?
Can you
Are you
lie
allowed
by
to
omission?
misrepresent facts to law enforcement? Deb, I see your screen up.
Can you just not respond if you don't want to respond?
Yes,
that
you cannot
considered a lie?
respond, but are you permitted to lie? I'm asking the specific question for a reason, and I'm going to get to why. How many people think that you can lie to law enforcement? Anyone?
I think it
No,
really
it can be
depends on,
held against you.
I
Okay,
think
go
it
ahead, Sister.
depends on the situation.
Okay, so Sister Sakina said it depends on the situation. Somebody said no. Okay, you can never, ever lie to law enforcement. I don't care what the situation is. As a matter of fact, even a misrepresented fact can get you into trouble. What do I mean by a misrepresented fact? Meaning, they ask you something that happened 3 years ago. You, in fully good intention, answer, but it turns out that the answer is not fully correct or in some way off, or maybe they questioned you another time and the answer is not the same as last time. Human error with the best of intentions. You weren't trying to lie or anything. And now all of a sudden, they are charging you with misrepresentation of facts to law enforcement. Potentially, right? Potentially. And it is a very serious federal charge that can get you up to 7 years in prison. So it's not a joke. So you never ever lie to law enforcement and you never intentionally misrepresent any facts. That means don't give them any shade of correctness, right? You have to say the truth. Having said that, can they lie to you? Can law enforcement lie to you?
Yes, they can.
So Deb says yes. Yes, from
Yes.
Emel.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of yeses. The answer is absolutely yes. They can lie to you. They routinely do it in investigations. They're permitted to. It's legal. They're not doing anything, legally wrong with lying to you, right? So they can say, I just spoke to your neighbor so-and-so. I just want to follow up with you. Could that be a lie? Yes. Anything they can say is a lie, right? My best friend is Muslim. I know he just came back from Hajj. We get that at the airport all the time. All of a sudden, everybody's a best friend to Muslims while they're questioning us and interrogating us, right? Could that be a lie? Yes, right? So this could be a lie, right? And I always remind people of two things. Number one, a law enforcement agent's job is to investigate, right? It's to investigate whom or what, you or an incident that you're involved with, right? So if that's the function, are they working in your best interest? No, right? And that's why you want an attorney to represent your best interest, right? And that's part of the reason why we tell you, do not open the door. We actually have cases of people who open the door, who invite them into their living room, who serve them tea and cake. I mean, literally, honestly, I'm not making stuff up, right? This is our nature as Muslims. We think we've got to be hospitable and, be good. And to be honest with you, I think even within our faith, there is a principle of, thinking of people with the best of intentions, right? To try not to be suspicious of people in a negative way. And so we have people who literally sit there and what they thought was going to be a 5 or 10 minute conversation ends up being an hour long, an hour and a half long. Now they've asked about you. They've asked about what masjid you go to, what mosque you go to. They've asked about your family members. They've asked about your travel. They've taken names of friends and contacts from your phone. And now all of a sudden it's coming to you and be like, maybe I shouldn't be talking to them. Really? An hour later? Right? But it's happened. We have gotten calls where the agent is literally there and the person is starting to get so nervous because of the direction of the questions and it's making him or her feel so uncomfortable. So they excuse themselves for a minute and they call us. And then I have to be like, get the agent on the phone. You're not talking to him anymore, right? Which leads me to the next thing that you should all know. If someone should open the door in your home, because I know you're not, right? You're all sophisticated now. You're not going to open the door for any law enforcement agents, right? Well, let's say, your spouse was there and he opened the door, or one of your children were there, or, a nephew or niece or whatever. And they went and opened the door, and you come out and you see the door open, and there are two guys there, or two law enforcement agents there, right? Or two female agents, whatever the case may be. And now you're face to face with them and somebody's already speaking to them. Can you stop the conversation once it's already started, or must you continue? You can stop it, right? You are not compelled to continue the conversation. You could end it at any point, right? And so what you need to do is to be like, officers, I think we're going to stop the conversation here. If you have any further questions or concerns, give me your card. I'll have my attorney contact you, right? Do you notice how I keep going to that basic, give me your card, I'll have my attorney contact you? That's your ace in your pocket. That's what you want to say time and time again. And the more persistent they get, the more they say why, you've got nothing to hide, the more they're trying to make you feel guilty, the more you're going to say, you know what, he's really pushing for an investigation. I better have an attorney contact him on my behalf. Because if they're getting, intimidating, if they're persisting, then shouldn't you persist to utilize the rights that are given to you constitutionally? Remember, you're not asking for some sort of special protection. They know you have that right. And I always remind people that if the highest of politicians, if the president of the United States will not speak to anyone with all of the power and authority that he has without attorneys being present, then why should I? Why should you? I don't have that kind of authority or power, right? If he needs a whole team of attorneys, then why shouldn't I have my attorney be my representative, right? So we try to remind people of this basic. Your job is to collect the identity of the agent, keep that door closed, have them put it in the mailbox or slip it under the door and say, we'll have an attorney contact you. And by the way, if they go on just talking and persisting, you can just walk right away from the door and not even answer, right? You don't need to go into a back and forth with him or her, right? Don't give yourself that blood pressure. You can just say respectfully, I'm not telling you to mouth off to anyone or anything like that. I'm just saying respectfully, officer, please leave your card in the mailbox. I'll have my attorney contact you. I've got nothing else to say. You walk away from the door and you don't put yourself in a position in which now you're being intimidated. Okay, that's 101. Talked about you not lying, right? Now, is this always the case? Are there circumstances in which you must open the door? Anyone care to guess?
If they have a warrant, if they say they have a warrant,
What kind of warrants are there?
search warrant.
Search warrant and an arrest warrant. Those are your two basic warrants. There are other warrants out there, but those are your two basic warrants that we're going to go over, right? A search warrant and an arrest warrant, okay? In both cases, what is a warrant? A warrant is a document signed off, it has authority, and it basically allows the officer to do a particular act. In the case of a search warrant, it means that they're allowed to search the premises or search certain property, right? That could be your vehicle, that could be your home. In most cases, it will be a portion of a property. What do I mean by that? Okay, agent so-and-so comes knocking at your door. He says, I'm agent so-and-so, open up, we have a warrant. Your job is to say, agent so-and-so, can I see some ID? And please slip the warrants, give me the warrants. If he can slip it through the door, that's fantastic. If he can't and you need to open at that point because he's saying he has a warrant or she's saying she has a warrant, then you can do that, right? You want to read the warrant, right? Having said that, I don't know if anybody's been around when a search warrant actually takes place. It can be a bit of a scary thing. It's usually not one or two people, but it's usually a whole team of people. And I'm talking about bulletproof vests sometimes. I'm talking about armed officers, right? It could be very, very intimidating. It actually does look like the way it is sometimes portrayed on TV, right? And so you're opening the door, you're just trying to get your wherewithal and trying to grab the warrants to read it. And all of a sudden you've got a whole team of people who are pushing you to one side of the home. So it can be an intense situation. But your job in that situation is to remain calm. You want a copy of the warrant and you want to read it. And the reason that I say you want to scan it is because most warrants will be very specific in what property they're allowed to take and what areas and property they're allowed to search. So, for example, let's say you live in a home and you have an attached garage. The search warrant says that they can search your garage. Your garage has a door on the outside of the house, right? Even if the garage is attached to the home, right? So are you going to let them through your home to get into the garage? No, you open up that garage door and you let them search the garage through there. They don't need to be inside your home, right? So you don't have to give them, the space and the feasibility to go into different places that are outside of the warrant, right? Now, you must get a copy of that warrant. They're supposed to give one to you, right? And you want to also start watching where they're going and what property they're taking. At the end of a search, they're supposed to give you basically a list of everything that they may have taken through that search, right? Now, if they have a search warrant and it says that they can take, they can go into your den or something like that, right? Your job is to tell them, here's the den, and they're going to start looking around naturally, and they're going to want to go into other places. You want to clearly say, I do not consent to any search. Okay, you guys heard the words? I do not consent to any search. Why is that important? Because if they end up taking something, let's say the search warrant is for your garage or your den, but they went into, Deb's kitchen and they saw some legal work that she was working on there and they decided to take it, right? And then they want to use it against her later on. Well, guess what? That wasn't in the search warrant, right? So unless Deb consents to them being in the kitchen, then they are not supposed to take it. But if she consents, if she's like, yeah, okay, it's okay, right? Because sometimes, again, that intimidation factor, hey, can I just go in here really quick? Whatever. And you're just like, yeah, it's okay, right? Well, guess what? You've given consent. What does that mean? Well, in the first case, if Deb very clearly tells them, I do not consent to a search, and they go ahead and search the area anyway, Deb is going to come back and she's going to tell me, hey, I read that search warrant, or here's the search warrant, and then I'm going to read it. And I'm going to say, Deb, you said that you were doing paperwork in the kitchen, but this search warrant says they were supposed to be in your den. What were they doing in the kitchen? And if she says, Afaf, I told them, I swear, I told them I do not consent to a search, then guess what's going to happen? I'm going to go into court and say they have no right to be in the kitchen. They have no right to use whatever they took from the kitchen, right? So it gives me a source of power that I can help to protect Deb if they're going into somewhere. Unless she gives them consent, once you give them consent, then they have that consent and they're permitted to do so. Am I making myself clear to everyone? Are there any questions thus far? It says, what about no knock warrants like in the case of Breonna Taylor? Yeah, so a no knock warrant means that you don't have to announce yourself. They didn't have to wait for the door to be opened. They can just bust through, right? Who was it that, Sister Umayma said they can bust through, right? Really, really scary situation. So those kind of warrants are not necessarily a typical warrant, but there is such a thing as a no knock warrant in which they would have to announce themselves. In that kind of warrant, they don't have to announce themselves. They may say police, but then they don't have to knock and wait for you to open the door, right? Okay, so again, these are very intimidating, and aggressive tactics, which is why we sort of have to prepare ourselves. Look, the truth is that nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them, right? None of us wake up and think that potentially an FBI agent is going to be at our door, right? We're just going about our daily business, and all of a sudden you're getting questioned. But it's really important for you to know what your rights are and to actually practice saying these things, because if you or a family member are face that situation, and I'm telling you, they're very common in our communities, then you should know what to say and how to say it. okay? The second kind of warrant, that the general warrant that we were talking about, was an arrest warrant. So what if they say we have a warrant for the arrest of, let's say myself, FF, right? So I'm at home. I've got a whole family with me. I've got young children with me. Maybe I have guests in my home at the time or whatnot. You know, maybe I have folks that are undocumented or whatever the situation is, right? Do I want to open the door and allow them to come inside? No, I do not. I would want to see the search warrant, but what I'm going to do in that case is, if the warrant is out for me, I'm not going to resist arrest. I'm going to open the door. I'm going to step out and close the
Outside.
door behind me, right? I do not want people in my home. And I want you to sort of think of the circumstances around this. If I'm in my home and my husband is next to me and my kids are next to me, whatever, and all of a sudden they coming in and they're like getting aggressive and they're saying, you stand aside. And now my husband is getting emotional and my kids are getting emotional. You can see how the situation can get very volatile very quick. It's natural, right? And if you have people who are at risk of being arrested for whatever reason, let's say it's ICE, right? ICE for, you know, immigration matters or something like that, then you don't want to put others in jeopardy. Rather, you should not resist arrest. You got to remain calm, right? And then you step out, you close the door behind you. If in fact they have an arrest warrant, they will detain you, they will arrest you. But the number one rule is, if you get arrested, is what's the first thing they're supposed to tell you as part of your Miranda rights? I know all of you know this.
The right.
Right to an attorney.
That's
Right.
not the first one. They do say that. Thank you, Sister Shane. What's the first thing they
Remain
normally tell
silent.
you?
Remain silent.
Remain silent, don't incriminate.
Right. What do they tell you? They say you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say, finish my sentence.
Can or
Against
will
you.
be
Held
against you.
against you.
Right. Okay. So look, Miranda is forcing them to tell you the truth on that one, right? They're saying, go ahead, open your mouth. We're going to use what you say against you. They're telling it to you. They're putting it on a plate. And that's why I'm always so frustrated to know how many people speak to them anyway. They've told you anything you say can and will be held against you, right? But the intimidation comes in, the anxiety comes in, the fear comes in. Even if you've done nothing wrong and you don't know what it is that they're talking about, remember that there's, you know, an ability for them to misrepresent or even outright lie to you. So you might not even know the whole story. And you find yourself speaking to them, trying to clear things up. But you're doing it without an attorney. Our advice is, again, we're not giving anybody that specific. Our advice is to tell you what your rights are, and it's up to you to utilize them. Do not speak without an attorney present. Very, very, very important, right? So I want to tell all of you that I have had somebody call. This is a young person. I'm not talking about somebody who just immigrated to the US or anything like that. This was somebody, let's say, I think in the mid to late 20s, who was born here, grew up here, everything. Got a first-time law enforcement visit, spoke to them, you know, hey, we just want to talk to you for a few minutes. Okay, sure. What was the issue? Spoke to them, whatever. He thought it was all good. It was gone. Then about a few days later, a week later, he gets a call because now they have his cell number. Speak to him again. He speaks to them again, thinking, all right, that's it. But now he's, you know, starting to get a little anxious. Why are they calling again, right? And at this time, now they're asking about his family. You know, how about your sibling? You know, this person, that person. Third time comes along. Now they're asking about the people. So do you go pray? Are you very religious? You know, what's your imam saying at the masjid, right? And it was continuing one time after another, until he finally realized that they were basically using him as an informant on his community, right? And that's when he called me. And I wanted to be like, are you serious? 3 times? You know, you were born here, you should know better, right? And so, but that's the case. And we really, you know, I've had full out arguments with people who actually invite the FBI and law enforcement to their places of worship. And some of you might be on this, so I hope I'm not offending anyone. But the truth is I've had arguments with people who invite the FBI to their masjid to talk to their local community. Now, I want to make something very clear. I'm not against law enforcement, in the sense that when they're doing things obviously justly, correctly, and they're actually serving the public, there's obviously a public need. God forbid somebody came into my home, I'm going to call 911 and I'm going to rely on those people who put themselves on the line. May God bless them for the sake of protecting me and my family, right? So please do not take this as a rant, a wholesale rant, against anything to do with law enforcement, right? But what I am saying is you have constitutional rights to protect your interests and the interests of your family and other community members, and you should use those rights. And when there's a legitimate purpose to talk to law enforcement, so for example, if I was a witness to a crime and then the police come to my door and I know I was a witness and I was there and I already gave a statement and everything, should I shun away from speaking to them? No. Is it still advisable to have an attorney next to me? Sure. Right? Because anything that they can say to me, they can say through my attorney as well, right? And I can cooperate through an attorney, right? So that's always your wall of protection. But that doesn't mean that we never cooperate with law enforcement. There are legitimate reasons to do so. But way too often, there are illegitimate reasons that you need to be aware of, right? And that's especially true in communities of color and especially true in Muslim communities. Unfortunately. Okay, so we went through the entire what if somebody comes to your door. It's already pretty late. Sister Umayma, you're not keeping me strict on my time. I was relying on you.
I'm just writing you now to say one more minute. But
okay. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly, with your permission, guys, I'm going to take 3 minutes. Is that okay with everybody? Sister Umayma, do I have your permission?
yes, sure.
Jazakallah khair. If you want, I can always come back. It would be my honor and privilege, and we can, do a second portion to this. The reason that I want to say this 3-minute portion is because the airport situation is something that really impacts so many of us. And it's really a very sad situation in which we have people of all ages, of all backgrounds, who go through additional quote unquote security screenings at airports, right? You walk into that second screening office and all you see are, people that are Muslim sounding names, or people that, look Middle Eastern, right? It's like 80%, 90%, people from the Middle East or Southeast Asia or any Muslim country, right? Why is that? Okay. Well, it's because by virtue of profiling, which is immoral and illegal, right? We are constant targets of being deemed security threats simply because of our faith or our national origin, right? And what that means is at the airport, they question you, they take you, you're coming through customs or whatever. They take you, they say you got to go through additional screening. They take you into a room, a waiting room. You wait your turn, then they take you into another room where you're interrogated basically by 1 or 2 officers. And during that interrogation, right, they take your phone, they go through all your personal belongings and your property and your laptop and so on, right? So very quick questions, just because I like the interaction of all you beautiful women. Must you answer them at the airport?
You should answer them.
Yeah, so if they take you, Sister Umayma, for example, and they take you to that secondary screening room and they say, okay, have a seat, I want to ask you some questions. Are you going to say, give me your business card, I'll have my lawyer contact you, or do you need to answer them?
I guess you have to answer them at that time. What you gonna do?
All right, and are they permitted to search all your belongings?
No,
Who said no?
me.
Sister Umayma? Okay, so here's the answers. Sister
Are they allowed
Umayma,
to take your phone?
I'm sorry?
Are they allowed to go through your phone? Take your phone and go through your phone?
That's a great question. That's definitely one thing that I'm going to go through. So here's the quick and easy answer, because we are limited on time. You must answer them. You must answer some questions. At the airport is where you have your lowest level of constitutional rights, right? The borders. Okay. However, that doesn't mean it's a free for all and they're allowed to ask you anything and everything. They can't ask you about your religiousness. They can't ask you about, you other things that have nothing to do with your travels. There are 3 areas in which they're permitted to ask you questions. Number 1 is to verify your identity, who you are, your date of birth, things of that sort. The second thing that they're allowed to ask you is your citizenship status, to verify, whether or not you're properly here. So you can be a citizen, a green card holder, or whatnot. And the third question that they're generally permitted to ask you is your purpose of travel. So when they ask you, why did you go to so-and-so, you give a general answer. I went for vacation, or I went to see family, or I went for business or leisure. You do not have to get into the details. Unfortunately, that's not where they stop. They often ask you many, many, many more questions that have nothing to do with those 3 things. With Muslims in particular, we have found that they ask them about what cities did you go to? Did you visit any mosques? Who did you listen to? Then they ask about political beliefs. What do you think about what's going on with Syria? What do you think about what's going on with Egypt? What do you think about what's going on in Iraq? Did you talk to people who are upset with the government? And they're asking you all these inappropriate questions that have nothing to do with those 3 topics that I outlined for you: your identity, your citizenship status, and the general reason for your travel. Those are the 3 areas that you have to answer. Anything else, it's your right to say, you know what, agent so-and-so, I'm not comfortable answering these questions. They have nothing to do with my travels, and they have nothing to do with my identity or my citizenship status. If you want to ask these questions, you're going to have to do so to my lawyer. That's your answer to that, right? Okay. And can they go through your phone? Can they go through your luggage? All right. Number 1, they can absolutely go through all your luggage and materials. Remember, you're at an airport. You got it. Everything that you come in with or go out with, they can check. Now, what does that mean for your phone and your electronics? We know that our life is on our phone. We know that we get things sent to us in multiple languages from all over the world, right? Okay. With your phone, it's a little bit of a weird rule. Okay. And I'm sorry, I know I went over the 3 minutes, but I know this is an interesting question that everybody asks all the time. For those of you that lock their phones with biometrics, meaning like your fingerprint, for example, or your eyes or something like that, your palm, whatever it is, in those instances, they can make you open up your phone. Weird, right? But if it's a password, a pattern, a number, something else, a name or whatever, letters, they cannot force you to open up the phone. That's so weird, right? The reason behind it is because the law, remember, the right to remain silent. The right to remain silent means you don't have to share information with them, right? So you don't have to give them your pattern, your numbers, your letters, right? But your biometrics is not considered to be a part of that protected feature, right? A little bit weird. So we always tell people, lock your phone and don't do it with your thumbprint or something else. Use a pattern, okay? So that's one thing. And by the way, it's also because the law really hasn't caught up with technology. So there's a big gap between technology and where the law stands. And there are lawsuits, and we've been fighting them. CARE and CARE New York has been fighting them on this as well, because we believe they don't have the right to go through your phone. But as of right now, they are. Do they take your phone anyway? Yes, they do, almost every single time. And I guarantee you, whether you give them the password or not, they take it to a back room, they try to crack the password, and they download everything. People come back to us all the time. They say they went through everything. All my apps were open, my files, everything, right? And if they cannot crack your password, because some passwords are that good with like iPhones and whatnot, then technically they can hold your phone for a number of days and then return it to you after a number of days, like 30 days. What we tell people to do is, if that's the case, you want to contact us and we will help you to get your property back, okay? All right, so last thing I'm going to say about all of this, what happens, look, if you're a US citizen, you always have the right to return, meaning even if you are the worst criminal and you have an arrest warrant, they cannot deny you re-entry into the United States because you're a US citizen. They can arrest you, but they can't deny you re-entry. If you're a green card holder, if you're here on a temporary visa, that's a different situation, right? We don't have time to get into that, but I wanted to point that out because I don't want to give general, advice for people that may be in different, have different situations. So if you're going to travel and you're concerned about secondary screening, please give us a call and we'll go through things with you depending on your citizenship status, okay? What if you don't give them your phone? What if you refuse to answer? Guess what? They're going to put you back in the waiting room. You may be delayed for a while. You may be even delayed for a few hours, but it's still better than giving away your rights, in our opinion. Okay. And by the way, when you do talk to them and you start answering them all those questions, you better believe that it's recorded. And next time you go into the country, when they ask you those questions and you give them a slightly different answer, because now you don't remember that you visited so-and-so place 3 or 4 years ago, all of a sudden you've misrepresented facts to law enforcement. You see how we went full circle now with the lies and the misrepresentation? That's why you always want law enforcement to deal directly with an attorney and you supply them the information only as is necessary. I have to stop there. I apologize. I know I'm a bit over enthusiastic, but we just see too much of this happening and I want to make sure that you're equipped with at least the basics, inshallah. Sister Umaima.
Yes, I really thank you very much, Ms. Nasher, and for sharing such information that is really so helpful for us to know. There's some questions that we may look at in the chat. There's one person say, please give me your card. They want the information to get in touch with you. What else?
I am putting in the chat right now our phone number as well as our website and an email. Okay. That way, if anybody has a situation that they want to talk about and it's a personal situation, rather than airing it on something that's recorded in public, you can reach us directly.
Okay, great.
But if there's a general question about anything that I said or there's any follow-up, please feel free to do so if I need to clarify on anything.
Yeah, so I just want a little bit more information about the no-knock warrant. I mean, I don't even know if that's legal in New York or in Westchester, but that whole situation was so disturbing. And so if they come in, they haven't, so it kind of bypasses them knocking on the door. They're in your house. They're saying they have this no-knock warrant. Do they have to show you the no-knock warrant?
Eventually, they have to show a warrant, right? But also think about the situation and the reality of what we're talking about, right? And you're absolutely right. It's extremely disturbing. There are a lot of disturbing situations with law enforcement. For example, this summer at a protest, we saw plainclothes police officers standing there with an unidentified car, and a bunch of men literally grabbed a woman off the street and shoved her into the car. And protesters like, whoa, what the hell's going on? And I swear it looked like something like a kidnapping in broad daylight, only then to learn that it was police officers, because then other police officers came to keep people away, right? So there's definitely disturbing things that once in a while we see, and the no-knock warrant is one of them, right? So the no-knock warrant is based on the theory that if they give time for the person to answer, that they'll either jeopardize themselves or jeopardize whatever it is that they're investigating, right? So that's like the underlying premise of a no-knock warrant. They can come into the home without knocking, but eventually, yes, usually if they have a no-knock warrant, there's a reason. They're gonna go in there either for a search or an arrest. In most cases, an arrest. So there is going to be an arrest warrant, right? So they can come in, they can arrest. What we always tell people is don't resist arrest. You can put yourself into serious jeopardy. Better to stay calm, do not speak to anyone, have your attorney. And by the way, when you say, I want my attorney, that doesn't mean that you already have an attorney paid for and you've signed a document, right? I just want to let you all know that, you can call us and without having signed a retainer or anything like that, you can say, I want to call our attorney, and you guys give us a call, or any attorney really, right? And then you can sign a retainer afterwards, right? So although it's always good to have an attorney's phone number with you. So Sister Sakina, I agree with you that it's deeply disturbing to watch, to know that somebody can just go in. We usually think of this type of thing not in the United States. We think in countries where, you know, they have crazy military powers. But look, let's be honest. The NYPD is the biggest police force, you know, in the nation, if not in the world. And they've got immense power and they've got immense tools, including Army grade tools, right? So we just need to be aware of what those rights are, try to utilize them to the best of our ability, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just protect every single one of us. May God protect us all.
Wasn't the no-knock warrant a factor in the death of Breonna Taylor?
Yes, absolutely. And we've had no-knock warrants go into the wrong apartments,
That's
right?
what-
That was
Yeah,
the big
exactly.
case.
Exactly. That's my point, right?
Yeah.
So yes, and that's part of the problem, because when they don't have to knock, announce themselves, wait, let somebody read a warrant, right? Then things can go very wrong very quickly, which is exactly what happened in this situation. But there are no knock warrants. They are permitted with a judge signing off, right? Because warrants need a judge's signature, right? So somebody signed off on it, and they had to have shown enough reason to get it, like an underlying danger or something like that. Sister Sakina, I apologize if I
No, that's okay. No, I was saying, so do you have the right to see that warrant? I mean, see the
Eventually you
no-knock.
do, but let me tell you, when a bunch of people are pouncing into your door and you're saying, what's going on, right? They're going to put you down and restrain you first and foremost, right? That's going to be, again, I apologize. I don't want to give a grim picture, but remember, they're afraid for their life as well. They're going to first and foremost control the situation, right? And they're going to bring you down. If you're under arrest, they're going to arrest you. They should put you in handcuffs, right? But then you do have the right to say, why am I being arrested? Do you have an arrest warrant, right? And they can say, here it is. And they will have an arrest warrant with them, right? That doesn't mean that they're going to unhandcuff you and let you sit at your leisure and read it, but you know that it exists, and your attorney will read it and take it from them, right? So they can. But the reason I'm trying to be very blunt is because it's a very scary situation, like you said, and we have to deal with the reality that this does go down. And you have to, your number one thing is to secure your physical safety first and foremost by not resisting. Ask, why am I being arrested? What am I being charged with? And then it's, I want an attorney. And that's it.
Okay, looks like the time is over, but I see people ask for part 2. Maybe we have to discuss that with the board. The other thing is that you mentioned about ICE. What's ICE standing for?
Okay, so ICE is Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. They are not local. They are federal officers that work under DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. Their job is to enforce immigration infractions, right? So we've been hearing a lot about ICE, especially under the Trump administration, in which they were really cracking down on immigrants a lot. There was a huge targeting, a lot more officers were there, and they were going into all kinds of places, including courthouses. That's a separate law, like that's a whole separate Know Your Rights workshop with them. We actually do have a Know Your Rights for immigrant reasons for immigrants in particular, in which we go over these things, how to identify the difference between ICE and, other law enforcement, for example, because they often imitate other law enforcement to try to get you to speak with them, or, that's really a huge problem. And then there's also other things, like, for example, if you're detained by ICE and you have minors in the house or your kids are at school, what do you do? Right? I mean, it's very serious problems, very heartbreaking problems. And we try to guide you through some of those rights so that you're properly prepared. We can definitely do that, inshallah.
One more question, and then I'm going to close because I know the timing. Does CARE help only Muslims?
Okay, so like we said, CARE is the Council on American Islamic Relations. I want to just differentiate really quick. For all of you who say CARE, we are part of the CARE family, which is a national organization. But I'm going to tell you now that if you go and Google CARE to ask them something or to do something, it's going to take about a week for them to reroute you to our office. So if you want to check things out, it's CARE New York. We're your local chapter, and we're going to help anyone that resides in New York. So always check out CARE New York. We're also separate for financial reasons and every other reason, right? We finance ourselves. We don't get funds from national or anything. So every chapter is responsible for their jurisdiction and their operations. So the question is do we only help Muslims? The perspective is this: Muslims are extremely underserved population. We certainly don't have many Muslim attorneys, and the particular problems that the Muslim community face in some respects are unique, and in other respects, they are not, because many people face the types of issues that we face. As a matter of fact, our civil rights are predicated upon those who came before us, who fought for the civil rights that we enjoy today. And I'm speaking primarily the African-American community, right? So there's a lot there. So do we help people of non-Muslims? Yes, we do. Are the overwhelming majority of our cases Muslims? Yes, because they recognize us. They know we have the cultural sensitivity for them to be able to say what they need to say, and we'll understand it, right? Much better than someone else. Having said that, you know, if anyone, Muslim or non-Muslim, comes to me, I believe it is within my faith, within my duty to stand up to that injustice, regardless of your faith, right? Islam, and I'm giving my own Islamic perspective here. I'm not an imam or something, but my understanding of Islam, and it's very clear in our holy book, is that we stand against injustice, even if it is against ourselves and our loved ones, right? And there's no context of only if it's against another Muslim, right? So our faith teaches us to stand against injustice, no matter who it's being perpetrated against or who it's being perpetrated by. And may God protect us from any injustice that's being perpetrated against us. And may God also protect us from us ever being oppressors and being unjust to anyone else. Ameen.
You know what? The question that we have, I will send it to you, because we have a question on the chat room. So because of the time, your time and everybody's time. But personally, I really would like to thank you very much. And Ms. Nasher, and as well as all the board members, I thank you very much for coming and speak to us. And we will talk to them about, because one of the questions here, they want you to come back and talk more about ICE. Okay, so we'll discuss that. Thank you. We have your information in, which is very helpful. And also, I thank everybody who was here from the audience, and our board. They thank you very much. Every one of them, they thank you very much. Now, I have just a message to the everybody who registered in our chat room today and register on this program. We will send a brief survey, and the survey is mainly to look into what better we can do to improve our next program. That's one thing. The second is that we do a lot of programs, and the next one coming is we call it summer luncheon, but this year is going to be a virtual one, and we always do our summer luncheon the last Wednesday of June. The last week of June is always in Wednesday. The last week of June, on Wednesday, we have this luncheon. So we will send you information about it. And I really can say thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Nasher. Thank you, everybody. And good night and be safe.
Thank you all. Have a good night. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Assalamu
bless.
alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right.
Good night.